So yeah, let's get started and welcome everybody to this event on research impact on sustainability practices. I am personally very excited about this event. One reason is because while doing research on sustainability, I always keep asking myself the question, are we having impact of practice? And the other reason I'm so excited is because this event is co-organized by two strong communities, the Sustainability Salon community and the Impact Scholar community. And I very quickly want to acknowledge the organizers that maybe can wave their hand. I want to thank Tima, Joel, Marie-France. They are part of the Sustainability Salon. Myself, you probably received some spam email from me. And I especially want to thank Garima and Sylvia because they really made possible today the bridge between those two great communities. In fact, they founded the Impact Scholar community with Nicholas. And those two communities have different goals. The Sustainability Salon has always been traditionally much more about sharing research and getting feedback on research. And the Impact Scholar really looks at what can you learn as a scholar in order to have impact. So I'm very excited to see this bridge. And this is to acknowledge the organization and the organizers, but the community is really about you. So it's really about the people that are now from all over the world. The Impact Scholar community has around 500 plus people registered as members. Similar numbers are seen for the Ivey Sustainability Salon. And I know many of you belong to both communities. So it just shows how much we have similar interest between the two communities. And I think the number of people that signed up today, 147, shows that in fact those two communities really have a lot in common. So thank you all so much for your engagement. It's really about your inputs and you volunteering as speakers. So today we will hear from people that in fact think a lot about research and impact. Before we get into the content, really quickly, I want to remind you about the technicalities. And I know we have been in a pandemic for almost a year, so this is by now routine. But please, if you can share your screen, keep your camera on so we can see you, so that helps feel us more engaged. Keep your microphone muted and also just chat. So in fact, we thought, why don't you tell us where you are from, how's the weather, or what time is it actually? That was the question, since we have someone from Malaysia that is now calling at 12 in the night. So let us know, where are you from, how is the weather, or what time is it? And please, if you feel like, tweet. We have the handler Impact Scholar C for the Impact Scholar community, and hashtag Sustainability Salon. So use both if you're talking about this event, so also other people can probably learn something about research impact on sustainability practices. This event is recorded. If you have any issues about that, send an email to me. And please just engage. And yeah, I see some people telling us about the weather and about the timing. And while you keep populating the chat, we will read it. I also want to give the word to Garima and really get into the content of today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Angela. And like Angela, I am equally excited about today's topic of the event around co-creation. And as many of you may know, co-creation is broadly defined as this process in which researchers and managers come together to work on a topic of mutual interest. But as you can see from this very broad definition of co-creation, there's a wide variety of how researchers have sort of designed these co-creation projects, and that's the beauty, I feel, of the topic. And today we will see many versions of how one may organize projects like this. So the focus on today's topic really stems from, this survey that Nicholas, Sylvia, and I did at the beginning when we were just about gearing up to launch the Impact Scholar community. And you will see a word cloud on the left. And one of the main topics that people wanted us to focus on was impactful research. And we're responding to sort of that need, that call today in organizing, this event. So collectively, we see co-creation as one way to impact practice. But like all great ideas, this one is not without its challenges and complexities. And Van de Ven and Johnson call this as the knowledge production problem, because managers and researchers come from such different knowledge communities. So our speakers today will showcase how they have designed, some of their projects in order to navigate these differences and really leverage the potential that is in co-creation. And we're hoping that you will leave with really concrete tips and advice for designing your own co-creation projects, and even getting inspired to sort of start thinking of designing one. So Sylvia, if you move to the next slide, I want to quickly share the agenda. So we're going to, in terms of the agenda, we're going to start with a keynote and lightning presentations, which will, there's 6 presentations and 1 keynote. It'll take about 30 minutes. Then we're going to get into the breakout rooms. When we get there, I'm going to explain a little bit more how those will work. We will come back together in a plenary reflection session, and then we will end with sort of a keynote, giving the overarching sort of takeaways and taking the conversation forward. So I'm going to hand it to Nicholas to introduce our first keynote speaker.
Welcome, everyone. It's great to see folks from all over the world adding their time and weather in the chat. Our first keynote speaker today is Dr. Jabassier, full professor of accounting for sustainable development at Audencia Business School. Jabassier has 18 years experience in non-financial accounting and reporting, and has worked with the UN Global Compact, the IIRC, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, R3.0, CDSB, and the French government on carbon accounting, integrated reporting, and other topics. Thank you for speaking with us today, Dr. Jabassier. Please begin your presentation.
Thank you. Putting my presentation on. Thank you very much for having me. I've been following both communities as much as I can, because in the pandemic world, I think it's like a breath of fresh air that we all need, and it's been really nice to have both communities. In accounting, have communities coming up, but I've been also going to the impact one and the sustainability salons whenever I could. I'll just talk briefly about research impact on sustainability practice. I've tried to connect to discussions that we had with Sylvia and the way that the presentations of the different projects have been put together. So I'll try to be quick, but this is reflection that I've had for quite a long time. I'm a former practitioner. I call myself a pracademic, and therefore the impact of what I've been doing is really key to my professional change, my move 11 years ago from a practitioner to an academic world. And I've always asked myself, how do we actually bridge those two worlds? So I'll go through what is impact, what is your goal and my goal, my journey, and the multi-methods in a way. I'll try to be really quick, and then you can just, if anything pops up then you want to talk, I'm happy to discuss over emails and other chats. I think one of the things that impact is actually a buzzword in my field in accounting for sustainable development. So this is not just impact of research, but it is a word that I hear a lot from companies about what is my impact. And one of the things that, this is questions for you, I'm not going to answer them, but are you always thinking about positive impacts? And do you sometimes talk about negative impact we could have, or unintended consequences of what we do? I don't often hear that from us academics, and I think we should sometimes worry about that as well, because science and scientists all over the world have not always been well regarded, especially during the pandemic. There has been a lot of controversies, including in France, over what has been done through COVID. Is it always linear? We always talk about theory of change and how it looks very linear. It's not. Can we impact without knowing it? Probably we do. Do we have to provoke impact or not? And don't we impact anyway? And those are all questions that I thought could be a bit provocative, about our research for impact, because this is something I have always in the back of my mind. Not all academics have, but do we really need to have it? So that's a question for you. On what is impact, I've put this famous theory of change, which I tend to think now is very outdated. I think impact and what you do is probably, and what I do is the one at the bottom that you can see here. And this is how messy and how impact is really. And you have feedback loops, you have probably cocktail effects, exactly like you have on environmental topics, and you need to think about that. When you do impact, or when you want to do impact, it's going to be looking really messy rather than straightforward. And then to come up with the question, I think it's really important to ask yourself, what's your goal? Why would you want to do impact? Do you need to do impact, and what you want to do? And so I'm going to tell you about mine, and then you do what your research has to do. My goal is to account for sustainable development. I'm not going to go into the details, but this is basically looking into planetary boundaries, social foundations, and trying to see how organizations, territories, countries can account for their sustainable development, or whether they are within what we call the do-not. So how to achieve this? My journey to impact, I think, I heard that, I think, in one of the first meetings on impact that I went on, one of the first meetings of the impact community. This is, why did I put a window? Because I think one of the first things you have to remember is that teaching is probably your first impact that you have. And when I started teaching accounting for sustainable development as a PhD student at HEC in Paris, one of the students came up to me and said, you opened a completely new window about what we're here for to me today. And that has stuck with me, that every time I can, and every time we can, we should open those new windows for the students we have. And that's probably where we impact the most directly. And probably also, without maybe knowing it, the most in-depth changes that we can do. So what do I impact myself? I impact accounting tools, people, standards, and IT systems. So over time, and it's not something I designed when I started being an academic at all, but I started to think about, where should I push to be able to impact change and to be the change maker that I wanted to be. I started with accounting tools and methods. That's the first thing I did. Then I realized there was no people to actually do and use those accounting tools and methods for sustainable development. And I started building case studies, training on that, and then also working on sustainability CFOs, chief value officers, and all of those. Then I got involved into standard making, and that's another topic, because you, Nicholas, talked about lots of things where I'm involved, including the revision of the NFRD directive at the EU level currently, which is very time consuming. And the last piece, which I'm currently also involved in, is how do we change IT systems, which are great structure for accounting. And if we don't change them, we won't change what's going inside. And how do I do this? Well, the first thing I do is I work a lot with companies. Not all researchers want to do this, but I get involved into what we call intervention research. I teach, of course, a lot of this to the students, including currently at Audencia. I use the media. I'm part of expert working groups. And the last thing that I did, and that's really probably the one of the things that that puts everything together, is that I opened a research center last year and an executive MBA chief value officer. And this is where now I concentrate the impact with companies and training for executives to use the accounting tools that we do for sustainable development. So encouraging you to see how messy it can be, and to use the leverage points as a system thinking to design how you do impact. And this is the connection with what Sylvia and Garima is going to talk after that about the methodology. I use intervention research, thereby I have an impact anyway, whether good or bad, but I don't always control it. Okay, so I try to work with companies, but then they can change, modify, use, or discard what I do. But then I'm really closely engaged, and basically compared to other research, especially in the critical accounting literature, you can have an impact from very far away using the media, comment letters. I'm thinking of somebody called Prem Sikka, who has a lot of impact on how accounting is being done, but from a much further ground than what I do. And with intervention research, you have a lot of depth, but you also have a reach that is quite low. You impact one company and sometimes more if there is, and there's not always a ripple effect if your work could be considered best practice and then looked at, but that's not always the case. When I work in working groups, there is less depth, but the reach is really high. And of course, the control of a result is really low. Just wanted to see, so you see that you can have different types of impacts depending on where you sit. The drawbacks of the way of doing all of this, and this is tensions that I've been experiencing in the last few months, especially being at the European level currently, playing the role of the scientific or the scientist caution without being heard is something that I have experienced very much. Doing the nitty-gritty work of looking at everything and then seeing the politics completely discards what you do because they have been lobbied by someone behind the door. Scientific expertise, and you have seen that a lot over the last few months, is not welcome anymore. So I have heard many people saying we don't need scientists, we don't need the academics on our groups, we just need the practitioners. It's funny because I was a practitioner, but that's something I hear. And you have to, in French we say manger son chapeau, eat your hat. So you've got the ability to compromise and see the big picture and what are still going, even if it's not always everything that you wanted to do as an academic and impact, you have to see the little changes that you might be able to do. Also wanted to come back because I heard a lot about the impact on career choices. Every country and region is going to be different, but I still wanted to give my own 2 cents about the impact on my own career and the choices I've made. In the US, in Canada, in UK, it might not be the same, so don't take it for granted. I have been in France, I've worked 1 year in Birmingham. I have had the chance to work with Canadian business school and to do visiting there, but it's not always the same. So basically, just for you to know, join HEC Paris PhD program in September 2009. Basically, joined my first business school in 2013. I returned in a way to full intervention research mode, which is a very time-consuming mode, basically from 2 to 10 years in that kind of research. Became an associate professor in 2017, went to UK, went back and launched my research center in May and July 2020 and became full professor in October 2020. It's nothing to boast about. It's just for you to say, it has an impact. It doesn't always have a negative impact on your choices in career. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened. What do? I publish as much as I'm obliged to. In my institution, I'm obliged to publish 2 papers at least for 3 stars for me every 3 years. And that's it. Of course, I do a bit more. I have other papers around there, but
Delphine,
I'm not forcing myself to do more. Yeah.
I have the wonderful position of being mindful of time for everyone. So I just would like to,
yeah.
to remind you of the time. Thank you.
Yeah. I do choose to spend time on expert committee. I choose long impact research interventions. My PhD also do that. And I share a lot. So that's choices that you have to take into account. So you have to define what your definition of success is. My definition of success is being change maker. and a full-time mom. I say that because in the pandemic, it has impacted a lot of women, of course. And I just wanted to finish with my inspirations. No talk. Tima, I know you were going to be there. Sorry to put you on the spot, but you are. Jan Bibington and Carol Adams are my inspiration for my field. Jen Law is, of course, one of my best friends. I would encourage you to look at all those 4 women's work. They are my inspiration for impact and research as well. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Really wonderful insights. And thank you again for sharing with us today. We will now move on to Sylvia for the lightning presentations.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you very much, Delphine. It was wonderful to learn from you, and you gave so many insights. Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the lightning presenters. Let me just quickly share the presentation again. So when we kind of announced that event, and we called for submissions of scholars who would like to present during the event, we were actually kind of overwhelmed by the amount of submissions we have received. And we could also see the diversity of impact creation in these projects. So therefore, we wanted to give the opportunity to as many scholars as possible during this event to present their work. So therefore, we have a quick round of lightning presentations, and you have the opportunity afterwards to talk to all presenters in more detail during the breakout sessions. But let me quickly introduce everyone. So we have Charles Schoes here from the York University, and Charles' project looks at ESG reporting practices in Canada, and he also looks at sustainability procurement. We have Esther here from the University College in Dublin, and Esther looks at responsibility in supply chains in Cambodia and Bangladesh. Then we have Eugene. Eugene is an early stage PhD student, actually Delphine's PhD student. And usually she looks at, or she wants to look at financial and non-financial accounting practices for small, medium enterprises. Then we have Surab from the University of Oregon. And Surab looks into impact accelerator programs, in particular the Global Accelerator Learning Initiative. We also have Helen here. Welcome, Helen. Helen looks at the effectiveness of social contagion frames to motivate climate change. And then we also have Stephanie and Annalena from the University of Hamburg. And you are looking at interinstitutional collaborations for sustainable development in the German context. So, and now we thought about a different way of showcasing their projects, because instead of only listening at short presentations and their research projects in particular, we thought about a way of how to kind of show the diversity of impact they are either creating with their project or they are intending to create. So we came up with a framework to just have it as a discussion point for our breakout sessions. It's definitely by far not perfect, but it should just kind of inspire you to keep talking about it in the next part of the event. So you can see a framework here that shows 2 axes. And in order to illustrate that there are 2 components we should keep into consideration in research projects. So one aspect is, how do we engage with practitioners? So is there a close connectionship with the practitioners we are studying from a very early point on, or is it more kind of a loosely connection in the project? And the other aspect is more related to the intended or realized outcomes. So we wanted to show a way of showing, as Delphine also said, showing kind of the ripple effect. So you can have your immediate outputs, so in terms of your publications, but what happens afterwards with them? Are they picked up by other practitioners? Are they picked up by the media? Or do they inform policymakers? So that's what you see on the x-axis, okay? And now I just would like to invite all of the presenters to kind of quickly talk about their experience, their opportunities, and their challenges. And I would actually like to start with the upper left corner with Helen and Charles, and to hear about their experience. And I would actually like to start with Helen, because Helen, you really want to motivate a diversity of people to work with climate change, or to work on climate change. And actually, I wanted to hear from you, what are actually, or how do you engage practitioners in your work?
you so much, Sylvia, for this brief introduction. So the project that I'm going to talk about today, it actually started out with me participating at a professional conference or a sustainability salon for professionals called the Change Now Summit in Paris, which basically featured presentations of many innovative business solutions that seek to tackle the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I specifically went there in order to discover different business solutions. So of people actually really on the ground who are trying to tackle the UN SDGs. And indeed, this is where I met the Climate Collage, are now the main object of study for our project. The Climate Collage is an association that basically engages in climate change education. Making the IPCC report of 2015 very comprehensive, very easily understandable to any type of audience. So the objective of this research study is really in close relationship with these practitioners of the Climate Collage, who are now even part of this project as research assistants. So some of the volunteers of the association, now we could actually even hire them on the team as part of our research team to co-create really this research study. And the idea is that this Climate Collage workshop, based on our research, it's going to itself become more impactful in terms of trying to make it more efficient, the way in which they deliver their workshop, to try to inspire participants of the workshop to themselves and afterwards be the change, engage in pro-environmental behaviors. And the research design, it's really around this idea of social contagion. So the idea is to train them about the climate science and then try to motivate them in turning this awareness and knowledge about climate science then into action, and actually mobilizing these people to themselves become actors of Climate Collage. So thank you for the brief presentation. I'd be happy to discuss a little bit more about the project later on.
Thank you very much, Helen. Let's look at Charles, because we kind of clustered you together. And Charles, what we found interesting in your project description is that you talked about how you work together with practitioners and you even include them as authors on your papers. So what are the opportunities of including practitioners as authors on your papers?
Yes, thank you for having me. Nice to see you all. So it's really two projects I put together because they are very similar in the way they started. And to be honest, I always had in mind to write something with a practitioner, or at least engage with a practitioner in my academic work, and was not necessarily intended at the beginning. And it sort of evolved organically throughout my teaching actually at Schulich. So it started with having actually all my MBA students doing an independent study on a specific project on sustainable reporting in Canada, which was sort of chaperoned with Catherine Ball, who is a part-time instructor, but also a sustainability consultant, whom I knew well. And it was part originally to put a sort of a report, a public report, and organize an event to really give the state of the art of sustainable reporting in Canada. And at some point, I found an opportunity to write it, to make it an academic form, and I just decided to invite them as co-authors to participate in the writing of the paper as co-authors. So the paper is an all Schulich product with Schulich students who are alumni, an part-time instructor who is a practitioner, and we managed to get it through. I mean, I did talk to the editor to explain that this is a little bit of a different type of a piece, but the journal that I published in quite open to this research. And the other one on procurement is similar. Megan was doing an Independence Day with me also on sustainable procurement in Canada. And Monica Da Ponte had a link with Hewlett Packard Canada, which also supported her. And at the end, we thought, okay, here's another sort of white paper kind of thing to try to speak to policymakers to really make sustainable procurement more a common practice in Canada. And now the purpose on this one was a bit more targeted to try to add legitimacy to the report by having an academic peer-reviewed paper. That one was a bit more challenging. We eventually found a special issue that deal with that. And at the end, we also got it through. So they're very similar. My outreach to these co-authors, practitioner students were limited to Schulich, but just to show you that you can also find it in your own school. I mean, you can find resources very interesting insights from different stakeholders. I consider MBA students to be, pretty much practitioners because they'll be out in a year or two and then they become alumni and consultants and practitioners. So it was, the bottom line is organic development of the projects, so similar with the students and practitioners, and again, staying within my own school. So thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you very much, Charles. That's great to hear. And it's great to hear that you involve your students as co-authors. And we had, just as a quick reminder for all of you, to see that you see the framework again. So on the other hand, we have Annalena and Stephanie. And Annalena and Stephanie, they follow a classic approach of interviewing and observing their practice partners. So I would actually like to hear from you, what are the challenges of not being closely engaged with them, but kind of working with them with a more traditional approach. Annalena and Stephanie, would you like to talk about it?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity.
I would like to start. Yeah, thank you.
I think I would start by introducing our project. So we engage with German foreign aid workers, or you would call it development cooperation. And we didn't actually plan to do anything else but interviewing them. And we kind of stumbled into a co-creation, as you would call it, because they showed so much interest in our work. And we ended up presenting at a strategic foresight workshop our research, and we started a conversation with them about the limitations of the business case. If you always argue everything with the business case, like what else is there that you might not be able to address? And then yeah, we also talked about capitalism and quite frankly the limitations of capitalism, which was interesting. And I think Annalena can talk more about the outcomes and the challenges that were connected to that.
Yes, thanks so much. I hope you can hear me well. Sorry for my poor connection today. I'm not lucky today. Yeah, the word capitalism or business case oriented argumentation really triggered very, very emotional reactions with some practitioners that we talked to. And we found that afterwards they had very, very intense discussions. So I think on the one hand, that was an opportunity because some of the people working in that intersection between the state and the private sector reached out to us once more and tried to intensify the dialogue with us. And they also gave us some feedback, what continued behind the scenes then later on. So that provided us with additional data, but it also made us rethink some of our own assumptions once again. And I think that was an opportunity, but a challenge was, or that's what we still try to figure out when we write our paper and address those challenges and issues and the limitations of what we, or the limitations that we see regarding the business case of development cooperation. It's, I don't know how to really frame it, but we feel like having been in close contact with a lot of those practitioners, we don't want to, betray them in a sense, because we're having such a critical lens right now, and many of them really don't. So we really wonder if that is a limitation of becoming very, very engaged with practice as well. That's just one thing I would like to highlight. Maybe we can discuss in more detail later on.
That's a very good point. Thank you very much, Annalena. Thank you very much, Stephanie. And I would actually move on to Eugenie, because you're early stage PhD scholar, right? And I think you're in your first year and you're also a Delphine student. So actually,
Yes.
I would like to hear from you, what are your experience in the very early stages of engaging practitioners? How did you get access to them, for instance? Tell us a little bit more about your project.
First, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to share the project with you today. So the idea of our project is to provide companies and especially SMEs with a new accounting tool to help them to follow and manage their environmental and social performance. Just like financial accounting can help them
follow and manage their financial performance. So we needed to have real data from companies. So there were those 3 SMEs in which with which Delphine was in contact. So there are 3 SMEs engaged in sustainability issues, and they are really interested in our project. So they help us to create the tool by providing us their financial and non-financial data for us to test the tool. And they also give us, we have done some interviews with them to understand what the specifics of their activities, and to build the tool to help them to calculate the environmental and social performance. And so it's great for me to work with practitioners, because I am a former practitioner. I worked for 4 years in audit. And so it's really great for me to still to begin with research and still work with practitioners who have practical issues of their everyday activities. So, well.
Great. Thank you very much, Eugenie. Thank you very much. And I would like to move on now to the last 2 lightning presentations. So we are now moving more into the area of the upper right corner, where we saw a very close engagement with practitioners and also huge impact that you're either intending to create or that is already realized. So I would like to now move on to Esther and Zura. And Esther, I would like to just stop sharing. Esther, I would like to kind of learn from you, because you are in a very early stage of your project as well. I mean, you are a postdoc, but you are starting this project. And I wanted to actually, or I would like to hear from you, how are you, or how do you want to create the results you outlined to us? So what is your approach to realizing those outcomes?
Thank you for first for inviting me. You gave me the worst question, I feel, because outcomes is really, yeah, we come back to the challenges here. But yeah, first I would just like to remind the people that I'm working with the University College Dublin and the International Labour Organization on a project that we called Shared Responsibilities in Global Supply Chains. So basically, yeah, the overall outcome is to create a shared responsibility frameworks for more responsive multi-stakeholder initiatives in global supply chains. But since this is a very big objective and outcome, we divided this into different phases. So maybe that would be the first step to do. And yeah, actually we divided this in the first phases also, as we said, like it's a bit really like the engagement phase, where you try to find out what is the problem. So obviously we defined this project beforehand and it got the funding, but then you sit down really with the organization, and if you really want to define then the goals, the outcomes, you sit there and you think, okay, so which problem are we talking about? What is the biggest problem that you're facing? Which outcomes do you desire, or are you looking for? So yes, so to the outcomes, then to get to the outcomes, very important, it was to really define what is the biggest challenge that you're facing. And I'm working with this Better Work program of the ILO, and they're doing compliance. So the issue was to find out what is the highest non-compliance, the highest and persistent non-compliance issues that you're facing, because obviously you want to focus on that and find a solution to this. And the step was then, or the idea was to define shared responsibilities for the actors involved or connected to this issue. So then the first step and the first outcome was then to define this issue based on a quantitative analysis of their quite extensive database. And then we found out that the first outcome then was to see that this was excessive overtime. And then we had the next phase, which was then do a systematic and interdisciplinary literature review to see what has been said about excessive overtime, which actors are connected to this issue in which way. And yeah, this was then in very theoretical work, and see, and the basis also for the field work then. So that was the second outcome. And then we actually planned the field work. We had found all these different factors that we had to take into account. And then I was about to go, and then the pandemic started. So there's no outcome. And
we really wish you all the best for your project. I know you have been working hard in kind of overcoming the challenges you have encountered with the pandemic. So I'm sure it will be all good.
Yeah, sure.
Let me move on to Syrup. Syrup, you're now the ones with the project that we kind of classified the highest, so to speak, because you work together with impact accelerator programs like the Gali program, who has received quite some recognition, and your work in particular as well. You have many publications, you even co-authored a book, and you have a database with more than 23,000, if I remember correctly, 23,000 enterprises, and you make this database widely available to as many scholars as possible. So to conclude this lightning round, I would like to hear from you. What's the secret of your success?
Oh gosh, so thank you so much. So this has been really fascinating for me to hear all of these different projects. It's really exciting. So I'll give you just a quick overview of GALI, the Global Accelerator Learning Initiative, which is something that I started with colleagues back when I was actually kind of working at the intersection of research and practice. So I worked at the Aspen Institute, and we worked with a number of accelerators, but we also worked with academics. And this was back in 2012 when, we started to realize, so we've got academics, we've got practitioners, the accelerators themselves, and we've got policymakers, and they all have certain needs. Academics need data. We'll work for data. But we also wanted to make an impact and kind of, have more of an impact on society. The accelerators themselves, what we realized as we started to study accelerators was most of the attention on accelerators was really focused on seed accelerators in Silicon Valley, which, is obviously very valuable, but there's hundreds of accelerators that are focused on social impact, either, supporting social entrepreneurs or supporting marginalized entrepreneurs in various countries. And a lot of those findings didn't really apply to this broader set of accelerators. And most of these accelerators were actually then being funded by donor agencies like USAID, by government agencies, by philanthropic foundations. And so for them, the practitioners and the policymakers, they wanted to know what was working and what wasn't. When we surveyed accelerators, we found that almost none of them really had any kind of tracking data about how their entrepreneurs were doing. So I worked with Peter Roberts at Emory University and Li Wei Chen, who was a PhD student there, to really kind of think about a lot of these accelerators were asking the same types of questions in their application form, but in slightly different ways. And in 2013, we started to work with 3 accelerators. And we said, look, what if you just, ask the same question in the same way, and what we'll do is we'll be able to kind of aggregate this data, and we will do, as academics, follow-up surveys, comparing both accepted and rejected entrepreneurs. And we wanted to be really careful about sort of not creating any kind of ranking system. Your data is your data. So it just goes back to this idea of establishing trust. And then, 6 years later, we have data from, I think as Sylvia mentioned, we have data from 23,000 entrepreneurs that have applied to over 300 programs. I'll, happy to talk more about the impacts of that. But the biggest thing I think for us is that we know what's working and what isn't in acceleration. We know, for instance, that most of these accelerators work really well, but not so well for women entrepreneurs. and they don't work as well in certain emerging markets. And so that's really kind of driven the next phase of our research, which is, how do we fix that? As an aside, and I think Sylvia mentioned this, all of the data we use, the anonymized data is actually available to academic researchers. So you can go to gallydata.org and request access to the data. I'll put it in the chat as well. But yeah, really excited to chat more about this and how it came about, and share what worked and what didn't work so well as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Surab. Thank you to everyone, to all the Lightning presenters. It was actually great to listen to all your experience. And as I mentioned, this is just kind of the introduction to the next part of our event, which are the breakout rooms. And Garima, I know you want to introduce the setup of the breakout rooms.
Yeah, no, great examples and just a teaser of all the complexities of these projects. So what we can do is dive into further details in these breakout rooms. So the purpose is, to really learn from these lightning presentation projects, but also some of you joining these breakout rooms may have your own co-creation projects in the making. So your breakout room can help you think through that if you have any opportunities or challenges, sort of keeping it concrete. If you don't have a co-creation project ongoing right now, then you can really join this brainstorming solution space and offer suggestions to others who may have questions. In terms of structures, we have created 8 breakout rooms. Zoom now allows you to choose the breakout room that you want to join. So when Angela opens the breakout rooms, you should be able to see the name and the breakout room number. Hover to the right-hand side, and you should of the list, and you should be able to see the button for joining. So as you've seen, these projects are at various stages and organized by people at various stages of their career. So we can learn from each and every one of them. So if you think that a breakout room that you've chosen is already jammed, I highly encourage you to come out of it and join another room. I think there's opportunity to learn from each and every project. We're hoping at the end of the 25 or so minutes that we have in the breakout room, you will leave with concrete ideas for advancing your own project and start to create these micro communities of people interested in similar designs, similar ideas. So I'm going to hand it to Angela to open these breakout rooms.
Yes.
Oh,
So actually, you will not see the name, sorry.
I'm going to say one more thing quickly because we haven't heard from Marcus. So we have the 6 speakers, we have Delphine, we haven't heard from Marcus. So I just want to give him a shout out. We're going to hear from him at the end of our event today. I'm very excited. He's winner of the ONE SIM Outreach Award. So just introducing his name then. And I think, Sylvia, I'll keep the slide up so people can see the names and choose.
Nicholas, you wanted to introduce Marcus.
Yeah, I was just in the breakout room with Marcus and others, and I went across a couple different breakout rooms and had some really good conversations. So thanks everyone for that. So we're now going to move to our second keynote speaker. Dr. Taussig is Associate Professor of Management and Global Business at Rutgers Business School and spent 11 years in Vietnam designing and carrying out firm surveys, operational audits, and business planning for organizations like the World Bank, International Finance Corporation, and other bilateral development organizations. Taussig's research includes work on engagement between business, government, and other stakeholders, and he, along with Edmund Molesky, won the inaugural ONE SIM Division Outreach Award. So thank you for being with us, Dr. Taussig, and please go ahead and begin your presentation.
All right, on mute, of course. That's how all presentations start. So many fun possibilities of things to talk about given all the interesting things that have been going on today. It's been really exciting to hear what everyone's doing. There's people who, actually a small number of people who I know, I've known a bit about their work in the past, and we've kind of overlapped often in these kind of practitioner academia overlap places, like Sarab, who we were both doctoral students in DC at the same time, both kind of 1 foot in development organizations and 1 foot trying to trying to get our dissertations done, and freaking out about it together. Also, Esther, by the way, doing work with Better Work and ILO, organizations that I'm super interested in, and I'm doing some work with ILO as well. So yeah, all really exciting. But anyways, I think I'm sharing some slides. Yeah, let me look at the time. So I don't talk too long about all those exciting things. I think my role is to just talk a little bit about yeah, my own experience and how I came to be lucky enough to get that cool award. So I guess my story, I think my identity is a lot about, is rooted in an experience of having lived in a developing country so Vietnam in particular, for 11 years. So this is in the early 1990s, so quite a long time ago. And then I wound up going to academia a bit late, so in my mid 30s. And that was, yeah, but my career in academia was very much shaped by those early experiences. And my integration with practice was shaped by those early experiences, because I wound up deciding I was going to kind of return to a lot of the contacts I had from the past, and I decided that, so I actually had this process where at first, as a doctoral student, I decided that I needed to fit into a box a bit more. And I was trying to do research like following models that I was seeing around me. But I did also find that I was a little bit less excited about what I was doing as I did that. And so as a junior faculty, so I happened to first to get a job that was back in Southeast Asia at NUS in Singapore. And so then suddenly I was only a couple hours flight from the place that I knew best, from the place where I had a lot of experience and contacts. And I started discovering ways in which I could reconnect with those contacts and translate some of the possibilities there into research. But that was hard, and continues to be hard, and I think in a lot of ways, yeah, my early experience of doing things, kind of following a model, was translating that into points on the board as a junior faculty member, which I think a lot of people are thinking about, was more efficient, was easier, but just it was a lot less inspiring. So I've kind of gone through a bit of a change where I've decided I care a bit more about the inspiration stuff, and am, yeah, I'm trying to work on stuff that maybe is a little bit trickier to pull off and sometimes takes longer. And so there's just a clear trade-off to that, that I think everyone has to think about. So yeah, just the pictures I was showing you are just me as a much younger man, discovering Vietnam, traveling. So in 1993, I did a study abroad with 5 other undergrad students, and we learned about this place that wound up being kind of central to a lot of my career. And then
Marcus,
so,
we're seeing just part of your screen. We're not seeing the entire.
Oh, you're not seeing. Oh, I thought you were. I thought I had only shared the.
If you maximize that window, I think it would.
Okay, sorry. Let me just redo this. Thank you for telling me
that.
that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, it's meant to only show you that.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. All right. Cool. So the project that, or the program that I've been most focused on the last few years, has been one that was inspired by just kind of being embedded in the Vietnamese context for a while. And it was, in part just walking around the streets and just seeing all the dangerous things that were going on all around me in terms of Vietnamese people, including my friends, kind of disregarding rules and standards and stuff like that. And it was often explained to me as being because people didn't respect the authorities a lot. They didn't think the authorities really were setting standards. because they, in the public interest. There was a lot of belief that it was about corruption and things like that instead. And then there was this one particular story in the news where a little girl was killed, died playing around a ATM that hadn't been properly grounded, and it kind of got electrified during a rainstorm. And subsequent police research showed that a totally scary share of ATMs around Ho Chi Minh City were similarly dangerous and potentially death machines in the same way. And so just kind of reflecting on, wow, how does that happen? And is it the banks? Well, actually, it's probably the smaller companies that they outsource the buildup of these ATMs to, and those guys are feeling comfortable doing shortcuts where they save a little bit of money by not grounding things. Why would they do that? And sort of just trying to think through the practicalities and what could really be done to change the mindset. Kind of realizing, I don't think it's going to be solved by enforcement because it's a limited capacity government. And so, and actually, to connect back to our community, one of the lucky things was I had previously gone to the Ivey Doctoral Academy at the end of my doctoral studies. And one of the mentors there was Andy King at Dartmouth. And so I came to Andy telling him about this project. I was kind of in the early stages of learning about field experiments, and told him that I'd arranged with some partners in Vietnam to do an experiment where we were going to randomly give some companies the ability to give input on a new law as it was being drafted. And then we were going to study whether that made those companies more likely to comply with the law. And Andy introduced me to, oh, hey, have you read the procedural justice literature? And I had not. I wasn't at all familiar with it. And then that helped me to sort of make a connection to how, oh, okay, I can actually fit this thing that was very much, just kind of out of my connections to practice. I can find a way to get it into my academic world. And so that was really huge for me. Anyways, just to kind of wrap up with a couple more pictures, that project was something that we were able to kind of see connections also, not only to that academic connection that Andy helped me with, but also connections to broader public policy debates. So we got to be involved. My co-author Eddie and I found, the World Bank was really interested in these issues of how do you increase government regulatory authority. So we did, and we were able to raise money to do the project. These things are pretty expensive too, but again, because we're able to connect to both academic and practitioner interests, grant organizations were interested, and so we specifically got money from the Jameel Poverty Action Lab to do an experiment. We sent out auditors to go to around 1,000 firms to check on their compliance. So this is one of our auditors and one of the CEOs of a company that we visited. And then the Impact Award was, about the kind of the fun aftermath. I see my picture's really fuzzy here.
Marcus, we have about one more minute before we.
Okay, yeah. So the fun came afterwards. I'll just sort of end by saying is having done all the hard work of doing the experiment, we then got to talk to a bunch of different audiences, including government officials. And actually one of the important things was we learned from them about certain impractical aspects of our study. And so my work going forward now is really focused on trying to say, okay, how can we, that was great. People said it mattered, but actually they're saying it's not practical to build off of it. Okay, let's fix it. So a lot of back and forth between practice and academia. All right, I think I can stop there.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It's really great to hear from the very first winner of the ONE SIM Outreach Award. I shared the link to your presentation on the award website, so people can go there and check that out too. Thanks. And we will now move to Sylvia for our conclusion.
Yes, so we are unfortunately already at the end of our event. We have 2 minutes left, and I would really take this time to thank everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's event as much as I did. I especially enjoyed the breakout rooms, and I was part of Eugenie's room where we were only kind of talking only with postdocs and kind of sharing their challenges and the experience so far. And that was great actually to see scholars engaged in impact creation so early on, from their first day on of their PhD program. So that's really exciting and motivating, and yeah, it's great to see. And we have a few announcements just in case you are interested in. If you're interested in continuing the conversation, so we have a few events upcoming. The Impact Scholar community has an event in February together with the Journal of Business Venturing Insights, where we talk about relevance, timelessness, and responsiveness in entrepreneurship research. And Garima, she is one of the keynote speakers. And the next Sustainability Salon will be around April this year. And if you are interested in presenting at the next salon, please write to Angela and she will coordinate it, because the theme of a sustainability salon really emerges out of the submission. So we really rely on your ideas and what you would like to talk about. If you would like to stay in touch with us, you can reach out to the Impact Scholar community or also to the Sustainability Salon. And let me just stop sharing the screen that we all see each other again. And what I always do with my students when we're at the end of a lecture, we unmute and we give each other a big hand of applause. So I would like to invite you to unmute and give each other a hand and together for a great event.
It's been so long since I've heard applause.
I know.
True. Beautiful.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
rest of
guys.
the day or a good night wherever you are at the moment.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Thank you.